yourself. The fact that you were an outsider going there. So how was that? Let's like just like how and then but then the way you portrayed the people, it's done really sort of with a lot of, not as an outsider I would say, but yes, I mean I'm sure you had difficulty, but we hear the voices and we see the people as they are.
So I think that's a really important point, because I teach global journalism at Emerson now, and that's a class I recently started teaching a couple of years ago. So until I started teaching that class, I didn't know what global journalism was, and I've learned that it's different than international journalism, which is more like parachute journalism, you go in there. So global journalism is more ethnographic, more anthropological, you go there, you live with the people, and then it's about not seeing another community as the other. So for me, although they saw me as a foreigner, and people in the village would come, every time I lay down to rest, we were in this tiny little house, maybe the size of this place, with one bathroom among 10 people, and I'm not going to describe the bathroom, but otherwise it was very nice. It was wonderful, we got wonderful food, the villagers were very hospitable, they didn't speak any English. One line that got cut out in the editing was that the villagers, the guy Amila, he uses Google Translate on his smartphone. So he had actually, when he learned about me, he had actually looked up and read my articles on Google Translate. But they saw me as an outsider, as a foreigner. Some people came to see me because they had never met a foreigner before. And I'm introduced, and when this film was shown in Colombo, it was introduced as the first film by a foreigner to be shown at a cinema in Colombo, about Sri Lanka to be shown at a cinema in Colombo, 25th of July. So that kind of jarred on me because I didn't feel like a foreigner. Yes, I'm not a Sri Lankan, but it's part of the region. And earlier, when you introduced, you talked about the Southasia Peace Action Network, which you are part of, and many of you here are part of that. SouthasiaPeace.com, anybody who's not, please join. And so we see this as a region. So we may have different communities in different areas, and we may not understand each other's languages, but there's something that binds us as part of the region. So you're right, I didn't see them. We met the families, we talked to the children, the wives, the daughters. Interestingly, the families that we're working with, they didn't want their women to come on camera. So I was surprised by that because I thought, yeah. So in the village we wanted, we didn't have the village women except for that one old elderly woman.
And you asked this question about the foreigner part. I think what I see in this film is empathy. You are talking as a student, their problems that you are raising. I think that empathy is the two things about the film is it's a very compelling film. There's a lot of empathy in it, and I think you have put it in a historical context, connecting it to the present problems, where it stands, connecting the economy with democracy. So I think I want to congratulate you on this. Excellent film that you've done. I've been a few times to Sri Lanka, but always either participate in a conference, so we were in some exotic resort, either on the beach or in Kandy, or once maybe just went around there as a tourist. Of course, one cannot ignore what goes around you and what happens. And especially as a researcher myself, you have these questions that keep coming up. One of the trips I did to Sri Lanka, we were going from the airport. So we were going from the airport to some place, like Kandy or some place, and the driver said, my village is next stop. So I said, okay, we'll all stop. We want to see you. So they took us to their home. The streets were, of course, well clean and everything. I wanted to see the side streets. Were they as clean? With the road from the airport is always clean. Our road from the airport is also clean and well paved and everything. The side streets were all clean. No garbage anywhere, no sewage anywhere. And the house that belonged to the driver was again very small. I think it was not more than 50 square yards. But absolutely clean. That's one thing that struck me about Sri Lanka. It's people are so clean. Personally, and their environment, the home environment, the city and everything. Then came the Civil War, and later also I had a chance to go, and I would ask them, "You're so polite, how can you fight?" And it was a vicious fight. And I still don't understand how people who are so polite can also fight. So I think that was my impression of Sri Lanka. What you have said, the history of democracy, I never knew that. I must confess, I don't know Sri Lanka much beyond what I've already said that I know. From what I know of the Sri Lankan economy, it's tourism, tea exports, and I don't know what else export. But COVID took away tourism. COVID just took away perhaps the main source of foreign exchange, and that's what, from a distance that I know of the economy is that. And of course, then they had to borrow heavily to carry on. Now, you said it is an uninterrupted democracy, but my impression of Sri Lanka is that there are 2 or 3 families that run the government, and they are alternatively in power. So it's an oligopoly that really keeps themselves in power, and elections.
It does change now.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's a good thing to see, it has changed.
Changing.
Because when after this upheaval, the new government that came in, it was all the old faces. Those who were, Ramasinghe was Prime Minister for 6 times. Ramasinghe, and so. It has high literacy, but it not has high technocracy. That's some of the things that I have researched much earlier. Everybody is literate, but there are no skills. And as a result, Sri Lanka has never developed an industrial sector as such. It's remained more of a service economy. If you put all your eggs in one basket, you are always subject to violent winds of change. There is a bailout and the economy is recovering as one of the meetings. I don't know what position she has.
She's the executive director of the Institute of the IPS.
Okay. I would be more interested how the poor people are suffering. What is the cost the poor are paying for the whatever conditions I am at this report, whatever they are doing. The macroeconomic numbers may begin to look good after 3 years, 5 years, but at what cost to the people? That I think. And there has been a leftist insurgency in Sri Lanka, which was very violently put down. That tells JVP. That tells me there is a lot of inequality in Sri Lanka, because that kind of insurgency anywhere can only happen if there is inequality. So I don't know if that, how is that being addressed?
So that started in 1971, 70s, that JVP. It started out as a youth movement, and originally it was bringing together Sinhala and Tamil youth, but then it became more and more Sinhalese. And then there was this insurrection, very violently put down, as you said. I think, I forget the figures, but apparently 40 to 60,000 people perhaps might have been killed. Some very, very violently. Somebody was telling me that one of his friends was like basically hand-drawn and quartered by security forces. But I mean, like really violent, really, really vicious. Then they came back. Then they came back. Then they started killing people who they, like including teachers and like people who they thought were collaborating with the government and whatever. Then that was put down as well. But so people have not forgotten their violence either. There was violence done to them, but they were very violent also. One of their leaders is now contesting as a presidential election, and he has good chances. So the presidential elections have been announced for September 21st. And just as I finished this film, actually the Indian elections results had just been announced. And it shook all us off our Indian elections. Symbolically. And so I felt this film felt very relevant to that. And then just when I showed this film in Colombo in end of last month, the presidential elections were just announced then. So one of the people who, senior political analyst who watched it, he says that this is something that all the presidential candidates should watch this film. So I think he's trying to make sure that they do. But now there are like 4 or 5 presidential candidates that are in the running, including Ranil Wickremesinghe, and also the former army chief who has had his insides blown out during the war earlier, and the JVP leader. So there's an array of people in the field now, and the JVP stands, from what I gather, a good chance.
I think another thing about Sri Lanka that I noted much before is that they always had populist programs. Like at one time they were giving free rice to all the people. As an economist, and I'm not a neoliberal, I'm not a capitalist, I don't think that's anywhere a good idea to do. You can't do that. But they went into that and they did it. I think so in some ways they never built a very strong base of the economy. They were just surviving, living off. They didn't build an industrial sector, production. They had very populist economy. Free education and free health is good, but free university education is somewhat questionable, and I think that's not the way to go. You said we are also on the verge of default. That's incorrect. We've already defaulted. I take a loan and can't repay, I am defaulted. Just because somebody keeps giving us loans, more and more loans, doesn't mean we have not. Now we are taking loans just to repay loans.
And I believe that defaulting doesn't mean that you don't have to repay. You still have to repay.
You still have to repay. They will come and take whatever assets you have. And they are doing it. They are forcing us to privatize foreign companies and one thing after another. Another thing the film showed that you saw is the farming sustained people. Because at the end of the day, at least they had food.
Yes.
Even if they couldn't go out and buy clothes, they at least had food. And this is also where Iraq survived the sanctions for many years, because agriculture was a strong sector of the economy and people had food. The danger I see, and Pakistan is the same. I think for millennium, we have had people farming and living off the land. That is now in danger. The new SIFC, the military organ which is bypassing the planning commission, bypassing all government institutions, formal institutions of planning for allocation of resources. If it comes from SIFC, nothing is questioned. If they want ₹1 crore, they will be given to them. And I'm saying this with information that I have. They have signed an agreement with a Saudi company, given them 5,000 hectares of land for growing fodder, exclusively for export. And they have asked Sindh government for 200,000 hectares of land. Similarly in Punjab. Now the question is, if we are going to give up our agricultural land to foreign companies who will grow whatever they want, fodder in the case of Saudi Arabia, to feed their camels. What about food for us?
And our camels.
Where wheat is grown and now only fodder will be grown exclusively for export, we will not have wheat. It's not that food will be expensive and we cannot afford it. We just will not have the food in the markets. So I think that they survived through loans. I think it was very reckless on their part to do that. We have done the same. The trajectory is perhaps even worse. We have, I don't know what they use the loans for, but at least till the uprising and the last days or the days before the uprising, there were basic foodstuffs available there and the transport was running and fuel was there. Only when the crash came that everything broke down. Till then it was functioning. We have, till the year 2003, which is exactly, I think, 20 years back, for every 100 rupees of government revenue, total revenue, our total expenditure was about 130. For every $100 of export, our imports were 120, 25. So both the deficits, the domestic deficit and the foreign trade deficit, were about 25, 30%. Today, for every 100 rupees of revenue, we spend 230 rupees. For every $100 of exports, we import $230. So what was 25-30% of deficit has turned into 125 and 130% deficit. And all of it has been for the last 25 years plus financed through debt. We have now reached a point where nobody is willing to give us debt. You know, IMF says, first you make a deal with China and Saudi Arabia, then we'll give you money. Nobody, even IMF doesn't want to give us money because they know it will not come back. Nobody is willing, then we decided we'll sell everything. Nobody is willing to buy anything. You know, we've not had no buyers for PI yet. They are unable to sell PI yet. Then they ask, these are land, stock market and property tycoons to put together a consortium to buy PIA. Even that's not working out. They don't have the money to buy PIA. They asked the government that you sell it to us and we'll pay you the amount in installments, and State Bank struck it down for fortunately State Bank did something good. Because we've done this. We sold MCB in 1992. They paid us in advance. Whoever bought MCB paid us in advance. For the balance amount, they took a loan from the MCB, which they now own, and paid the government with that loan. So it's happened before. They thought we dobara karenge, ye nahi ho sakta. So I think, and we've had this upheaval. May 9th was certainly an upheaval, and it was very different from the 1968 and the 1977 upheavals that we had. Both these were merely fighting to change the incumbent government, change the face, and then everything continued. This one, this particular May 9th hit at the core of the state power. And it has fractured that state power. There are so many in the military itself that support, that were either part of May 9th or supported May 9th. I'm not sure if what happened in Bangladesh or in Sri Lanka will happen here. I think Islamabad is too remote. And the President House and the Prime Minister's houses are too remote. The crowds will be stopped 2 miles ahead before they can reach anywhere. But even if that doesn't happen, both these, Bangladesh and Sri Lanka, are cases of explosion. What I fear is that we don't have the ingredient for an explosion. We are imploding. We are collapsing from within. And I think that is going to create anarchy in our own lives. And it will creep up, so we will not realize what is happening. It will just envelope us.
Thank you. On that cheerful note, I'm going to open the discussion up for questions.